Hi guys, and welcome to a Hector Lecture Guide to the UCoB phase Golden Bahamut. This is the fifth video in a series of 5 guides breaking down the entirety of the Unending Coil of Bahamut Ultimate Raid. If you still need help on any of the previous 4 phases, I'll link to my guides to those in the description below. Assuming you've watched my ad phase video, you'll know that ad phase finishes with Bahamut casting Terra Flare with a big countdown. As it goes off, there's a massive explosion of flame, and the entire party is dead. But if you manage to clear ad phase with the ethereal attunement below 100, this will not be the end of the fight. Instead, the stage will transition, and you'll see this text box below. You'll then see the Phoenix start to fly around the arena, crash into Bahamut, and reappear with a fiery explosion, giving everyone the Phoenix Blessing buff and the party LB3. Now, Golden Bahamut phase is sometimes referred to as a bit of a victory lap. That's because all of the mechanics in this phase are incredibly simple to understand on their face. The difficulty comes in this buff. It will massively increase every player who has it, their DPS output. But if you die and need to be rezzed during the phase, you will lose the buff, making it very difficult to meet the DPS check. Even in Endwalker, the DPS check for this phase is still steep enough that you cannot afford to have too many players dying, especially not early in the phase where they'll lose the most benefit of the Phoenix Blessing buff. With that said, Bahamut's going to crash down to the ground and transform into Golden Bahamut, your enemy for this phase. Let's break down the 3 and only 3 mechanics you will see during this phase. First is Mornifaw. This is an incredibly hard-hitting raid-wide attack that's going to be shared across the party. You need to make sure that your party is stacked together, and you need to make sure that you mitigate this significantly. The general rule of thumb is that you need 30% mitigation as well as shields to be able to survive this, so 3 10% in shield. Morn is a tank buster targeting the main tank, but the damage from it can be shared across both tanks. Either have both of your tanks pop a lot of cooldowns to deal with this, or have one tank take it with invuln. Be aware that Morn hits repeatedly. The first time that it hits, you're only going to see 3 actual hits, but every successive attack is going to add 1 more to a total of 6 on the 4th time that you see this. Finally, there's Exaflares. A random direction is going to see 2 red circles showing the direction of where the explosions are going to hit. As the first explosion hits, you're going to see the second set. Finally, there's a third set. As you see the third set, assuming you've lined up in front of it, you can do what's called a 3-to-1 dodge and simply move across. This doesn't have to be done on the edge of the arena. It can be done anywhere, but I find the edge of the arena to be the simplest place to be able to do this without making a mistake. Because these explosions cover the entire length of the arena, there is no secret safe spot. There's no place to hide. You do need to dodge it, or it will hit you. And for any non-tank player, 1 hit is almost certain death. There's another way to deal with these that doesn't require you to have to wait until you see the third set. You can simply just dodge to the side of wherever the first explosion is, and count 2 explosions. After 2 hits, move into where they were. This allows you to time it right for even a 2-to-1 dodge, and it doesn't require you to have to wait. You can just pick a side and dodge in through that. Dealing it with this way can sometimes be easier. With that said, that's all 3 of the mechanics broken down. Let's look at now the actual order of this phase. The first mechanic we're going to get is a Mornifaw. I recommend as soon as the boss is targetable, they'll start to cast this, have a melee use the LB3 you were given by the Phoenix for a melee LB3. We'll deal with the Mornifaw with standard mitigation. You need, again, 3 10% as well as shields. I recommend a pattern similar to this. Have one tank use Reprisal. The same tank or another tank can use one of their tank mitigations. Healers can use their short healer cooldown as well as big shields. If you have a Scholar, this is the perfect time for deployment and Adlock as there's downtime before the cast. And then finally have one of your DPS use a mitigation. Addle would be a sensible one if it's up. Have the whole party stacked together. The melee LB3 will go off, and very importantly, your LB bars are going to empty before the hit hits, and you're going to instantly, from the damage, gain an LB1. We'll talk about why that's important later. Immediately afterwards is Akmorn. Have your tanks agree on a location to take this together and have them pop every single cooldown. The order I'm showing in this guide has the tanks take the first tank buster with cooldowns, the second and third each with an invuln, and the fourth with cooldowns. If you do it like this, your tanks will be able to use every single cooldown, as even 2-minute cooldowns will be back up by the fourth tank buster. Make sure that they're away from the party, nobody else is close enough to get clipped. Your healers won't have to do much here because 3 hits tends to not do much on a tank using full cooldowns. Exaflares will now appear on a random side and have your group start to dodge these. Just like we mentioned before, you can just immediately go to the side, wait for 2 explosions, and then dodge into the side. After Bahamut is finished casting this, he is going to chase after the main tank, so you'll get uptime for a considerable while explosions are going off. Great chance for you to get your DPS in while everybody's together. As you're waiting here, whichever tank currently has aggro should be prepared to move through the boss. They can do this as soon as it's safe to do so, because they're going to be targeted with an Akmorn. This one they'll deal with an invuln. As long as the rest of the party just stays along the wall, they will naturally dodge it. Only your tank needs to move. Remember, this time it's going to hit 4 times. Now there's a Morna Fa. You need to mitigate properly for this and have the whole group stack together. There's a trick. Remember that LB that we got from the first Morna Fa? Have your tank use it. This is 20% mitigation, and it means that you can take every Morna Fa from this point onwards with just tank LB, a reprisal, and shields from your healer. I still recommend adding some extra mitigation on for comfort, but it's not necessary. Pop your LB, pop your mitigations, have the whole party stack together, and take the Morna Fa. Afterwards, have a tank pull the boss towards middle just to make the next Exaflare dodge easier. You might notice that currently I have the off tank moving the boss. That's because the off tank is going to take the next tank buster with an invuln, and before the cast starts for that Akmorn, they need to make sure that they're the tank with aggro. This is a perfect time to do so. The next Exaflare will be cast, and explosions will appear in a random direction. I'm going to skip ahead quite a bit here. Just be aware that you would deal with this exactly the same as before, and your group will end up behind where those explosions took place. Now we get the reverse order of what we had last time. It's going to be a Morna Fa into an Akmorn. The whole group can just stay stacked together and mitigate appropriately. Again, tank LB, reprisal, and shields is enough, though you should have extra things available. Be aware that there's 90 seconds between the first, third, and fifth explosions, which means that any 90-second cooldown, like Addle, Heart of Light, Shake It Off, will be available to use for the first, third, and fifth if you choose. Mitigate and just stay against the wall to take the Morna Fa together. The next after this is another Akmorn. As your off-tank has aggro, they can take this with their invuln. Be aware, because it hits 5 times, even with the new 10 seconds length for every single tank invuln, you might, for comfort on your healers, want to wait until near the end of the cast to pop your invuln. This is especially important if you're a Dark Knight, depending on something like a Benediction or other heals to be able to support your Living Dead, as there's not much time after all 5 hits if you don't pop your invuln as late as possible. Pull the boss middle again, ready for another set of Exaflares, coming from a random direction. Be aware, these don't have to start from a cardinal. They can come from anywhere around the arena, and they'll cover an entire line to make it so you have to dodge them. Deal with them exactly the same way as before. So again, I've skipped forward here to not show the whole dodge. And you're going to get another Morna Fa into Akmorn combo. Deal with the Morna Fa with standard mitigation. Tank LB, reprisal, and shields is still enough to cover it, but use extra mitigation if available. And for the Akmorn, this final one, your tanks are out of invulns if you're following this guide, which means that they both need to take it with every cooldown available. This is going to be a hard-hitting tank buster, as there's 6 total hits, so have your healers watch out with shields and additional heals to top up during the attacks. And if your DPS can spare it, Addle and Feint would both be helpful, with Addle being more effective, as the tank's busters are always magic-based damage. After all 6 hits, assuming you've managed to keep your tanks alive through it, whichever tank is currently tanking can pull the boss middle, ready for one last set of Exaflares. Again, they appear at a random direction, and dodge with them exactly the same as had been done before. All that's left is one last Morna Fa. Follow the exact same mitigation that you've been doing. If you have any mitigation left, now's the time to use it, so throw everything that's off cooldown onto this to make it so that you can survive it. Immediately after this, the boss is going to cast another Morna Fa. This one's different. This essentially serves as the rage for the fight. Every single player is going to be targeted one at a time in order of the aggro table for the boss. To make sure that you have maximum time to be able to kill the boss, have your group spread out with your tanks and melees in melee range and your ranged and healers further away. If you're trying to meet the DPS check and it's tight, be aware that you've got two things to help you out. One, have one of your melees use that LB1, assuming it's a DPS gain for them depending on where they are in their rotation. And two, because the boss is targeting the players in order of the aggro table, you can have both of your tanks shirk the same healer. Healers tend to be lower DPS than any of the DPS players, and this should bring that particular healer up to third in the aggro table, giving all of your DPS an extra second or so to be able to attack the boss and squeeze out every last bit of damage. However you deal with it, the boss is going to start casting the Morna Fas, and each player when they get hit will take enough damage to 100% certainly die. If even a single player is left alive when you manage to take down Golden Bahamut, you've done it. You have cleared the Unending Coil of Bahamut. That's it. That's everything there is to this fight. Thanks for watching my guides. I hope you found them useful. As always, if you've got any questions, tips, or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section. Thanks again, guys. Take care.